I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gonna be biblical.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriots Across the Pond. Happy Monday. Today, we have a wonderful guest with us and someone that I am very happy to call one of my dear friends. We have Laura Eisenhower joining Stu and I. How are you guys?
Hi there. Doing great. Nice to see you both.
And you as well.
Yeah.
Great.
How's the weather in Montana? We were just chatting off screen about how everything's getting cold, huh?
Yeah, it's windy and cold and cloudy and lovely. Yeah.
And Stu's got a few layers on, right?
No, over there in the UK.
I've got my
New
York and long johns. It's cold, wet, and dark, and windy most of the time.
Yeah. I heard a really funny thing the other day. I think it was on TikTok. My kids always, watch these TikToks, but tell me this doesn't sound like a plan. I don't know if I told you this, Stu. This guy goes on and he wants to rearrange the calendar. Okay. And he says that we have Thanksgiving, and as soon as Thanksgiving's over, we go right into the Christmas season, right? But then we have January and February, and it's like dark and wintry, and there's nothing to look forward to. And in February, we have Valentine's Day. So his idea was to take Valentine's Day, put it at Christmas. So everybody has like December, they're finding their true love, they're getting ready. Then the end of December comes, we start the Christmas season. We go all through January, and then February's Christmas. I thought that was brilliant.
That is. It is. I like it.
Sounds cool, right? All right, so we've got a lot going on. I know you have been you've been traveling, you've been doing a lot of speaking lately, right?
Yeah, last couple of months they were all just kind of piled into the same time frame, so it was pretty nonstop for a couple months.
Yeah, I know you were here in New York in October at the New York Awakening Summit,
and then back again in November for New Life Expo.
Right.
Yeah,
busy.
Yeah.
So
where do we start? What I can say is that when you were in New York and you were talking, I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you had like 40 minutes or half. It wasn't a whole hell of a lot of time, but people were clamoring for you to continue talking about a lot of the things that you've experienced, your knowledge, the research that you've done, into the Eisenhower presidency years. And so, like, where are we now? Let's I know you have some things that you've been talking about related to those years, and I know you did a lot of research. I just think people just can't get enough of that, but that's kind of historic. And then we were going to kind of talk a little bit more to what's going on today, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we got some slides, so we'll check out the slides and get into some of the history For sure. So, and the history is important to look at, to frame around the times that we're in, because this is the time of disclosure. That documentary Age of Disclosure just came out. And the reason why I think, it's so important to understand what really went on in Eisenhower's administration is because it was a very, very important administration in terms of ET technology trades. What happened after the Second World War? Did we really win the war? What was Project Paperclip all about? And what I've been focusing on is an event that took place in 1952, which we'll look at with the slide. 1952, when Truman was president, an unconditional surrender agreement took place where we surrendered to the ICC Nazi Draco alliance, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate. And that's not something you hear about, right? So as disclosure unfolds in the here and now, if we don't really understand truly what's happened, we could fall into the pit of a false narrative. And I have not been biased just because I'm an Eisenhower trying to protect the name. I really did come here for truth. And when I first started to be a speaker, I was sharing about the rumors that I was hearing. And I was sharing what people like Gerald Light had said and other whistleblowers and researchers. And and I brought that to light. But in further investigation and synchronicities and all sorts of, interesting developments, I got to a deeper truth, and it resonated with a lot of what Lisa Renee has said. So when I was formally presenting that information, I was, trying to see it through the lens of Eisenhower. Like, why would he sign treaties? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And if he had signed treaties, it certainly isn't showing up in my upbringing. I'm not seeing, alien technology in the barn. I'm not seeing anybody going to interplanetary corporate conglomerate meetings. Let's see. And so my whole life has been about unpacking all this and trying to get to the truth. And so my presentation shows some of the incredible revelations and whistleblowers and people that are very much in the know. It goes into that information. So I just wanted to share that first. And just when we talk about the here and now, some interesting developments that are a little bit out of that arena, if you want to go there, anywhere you want to go.
Well, I think our, most of the people that follow us, and of course, new people are coming on board all the time. I think, just to put it in perspective, I think a lot of historically what was being said, and there's still people today who are still saying that, right? That Eisenhower somehow was responsible for, a lot of bad things that happened, and that he was behind certain things. I think, like, we were on a show one time with someone else who was sort of that ilk, until you kind of set them a little straight in terms of the facts. And I think what's important to note is that during the time that he was president, there were a lot of battles that, and I don't just mean that literally, figuratively, there were a lot of battles that were taking precedent over some other things that were happening. And I think he sort of saw the big picture of what was really going on. And I think a lot of people blame him, at least like when we think about what eventually happened and Project Paperclip and a lot of those things. But truthfully, he did not have all the power that one would think, because he had the military industrial complex, which had amassed a great amount of power and was doing things behind his back. Is that true?
Oh yeah. 3-letter organizations happened, or really started to develop 2 years after, Admiral Byrd's expedition in 1947. Paperclip was 47. 1952, this unconditional surrender agreement. And when we look at ET government relations, I mean, that really originates in the 1930s. Even previous to that, Phil Schneider talks about that. Keylontic Science talks about that. There's so much information. Dan Cooper, the whistleblower and experiencer and physicist that I'm going to introduce in this segment, or in this show today, talks about that. So 1930s, we reached warp 1, the technological capacity that made it so federations and ET contact was beginning to take place. And Tesla's technology became weaponized. It was sold to the Nazis, and we put bases on Moon and Mars and all this sort of stuff that most people would be like, no, that's just, how could that possibly be? Well, I was recruited to go off planet. So, I've spent my whole existence after that recruitment trying to get to the bottom of all of that, and tracing it back to when this all began to take root. So the 1930s, during Franklin Roosevelt's administration, starting in 1933, there was already ET making contact with the governments. And it was actually Hitler, Crowley, and Churchill, Aleister Crowley, that were a part of the original deals. So after this infiltration, after 1952, 1947, the attempted expedition of Byrd, now we're dealing with, MJ-12, three-letter organizations, and the formation of the shadow government. So Eisenhower did not have power. It was done behind his back. But in order to stay in the shadows, which is why they call it a shadow government, they needed to put the blame on someone that would mean that nobody looks over there to where they are. And yes, the rumors are still spreading. These things go viral. Every day I get mail. Every day somebody tags me and says, oh, look, what they said about your great grandfather. Every day, I just see videos that are being put out there because this is what they really want to push. They engineered this for a reason so that when it's time for disclosure, everybody's going to look over there. Dan Cooper says they spend millions, if not trillions of dollars every year to disparage Ike, to get everybody to put the blame on Eisenhower because they don't want to see what he actually did. And he also said it's to undermine me. It's a way to attack me indirectly. And I'm like, okay, you really think that they would spend money to just try and get at me? I mean, whatever. I mean, they do it to all of us truthers, and smear campaigns. All of us truthers, deal with some kind of smear campaigns. The reason this particular thing is so targeted, though, is because it really does represent a timeline. And the timeline it represents is, sovereignty, freedom, understanding that we are the ones to rise in our own leadership. Because Eisenhower was briefed, he worked very closely with Val Thor, and they appealed to the Guardians. So basically, in order to counteract this infiltration, Val Thor helped and assisted him, who was rogue, not part of the Federations, because the Federations were already in alliance with the deep state, actually, even if it's a mixed bag. So Val Thor helped the Eisenhower administration, and they appealed to the Guardians. He seeded the White Hats, the Earth Alliance, Ike's Force, and all these positive military units that survive today, and groups, and ordered an invasion on Dulce underground military base in 1954, the same year he's being blamed for the Gurata Treaty. He is literally ordering an invasion to try and take out the Greys. So we need to know all of this because the greater message is, okay, the Guardians, and this is ancient. This isn't just because Eisenhower appealed to them with the help of Val Thor. It had to happen in the government. So there had to be a seed planted in the darkest of inversion to assist us in this time of disclosure, to get to the bottom of what's really been going on. So it represents a timeline, right? And what is the timeline? Well, he was briefed about not only a descendant being born that would help carry out the legacy or the truth, the greater, bigger picture legacy, not just limited to Eisenhower, and that a whole bunch of us would be born, and we'd all find each other, and we would be the ones to take down the deep state. So yes, we can look outside of ourselves, and there's hope. There is positive military, there's Earth Alliance connection to this administration and White Hat connection, no doubt. But the most important thing is this is a war on consciousness. We're dealing with psyops, false flags, geoengineering, trafficking. I mean, we know the depth of depravity and manipulation and falsity that is happening on the planet right now. And it's up to us to win the war on consciousness. And for each of us that is capable of doing that, is another person rising to the occasion of, helping to break down the control matrix, control systems. It naturally does grid work. It begins to collapse the infrastructure of the inverted system because it requires us to be hooked in, and it feeds on us. It siphons and harvests our energy to battery up these artificial timelines that a lot of people consent to because they don't realize that New World Order is the end result. That's why they say, yes, 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 they're doing it because they care about us. So they want to help us. When we saw what happened with the, in 2019, 2020, they don't realize that these psyops and false flags are bait to get us into a more enslaved society that people wouldn't recognize as New World Order because they think they're doing the right thing, because they've been groomed and socially engineered for decades to be compliant, because they think that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it is. But it's those that are willing to stand up and realize the actual truth. That's the home of the brave and the land of the free, is in our hearts, because we didn't really win the war.
Right. So, Laura,
solution.
What's that?
Problem, reaction, solution.
Exactly.
Precisely. So, Laura, here's the thing. It's just like a question. I'm sorry about the dog barking. When you say that this has been going on for thousands of years, like, just what is the goal? What is the end goal of the what we now call the deep state? But through what we know now with whistleblowers and, whether it be people like Bill Cooper or yourself, who's done the research, who was actually, confronted to go off planet, and, where you're aware of a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. What is the purpose? Because for people to understand how to stand up and fight and use their consciousness, they have to kind of know what this is all about. Why are they, what is it, what do they want? What has been their reason to make us compliant?
Well, it's a control system. It's vampiric. When you lose your direct connection to source energy, you're going to plug into those that carry light, humans, their life force, Kundalini, targeting children, the slave trade that is on a much bigger picture level in secret space programs as well. It's a form of currency in their eyes. And how this has gone off planet is pretty alarming. There are many, many levels to, the secret space programs. So I do presentations on this. I go all the way back to the beginning, the source energy and the Christos Sophia and how the planet was formed, the explosion of Tiamat and Tara collapsing into harmonic universe 1, and how this earth was created with an ancient fracture and an ancient trauma that was embedded in the earth grids. And so nefarious groups that were fallen saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of a vulnerable system that wasn't very, stabilized, because of these galactic wars and all these different conditions. So later on, they implanted a reversal grid technology in the grids to begin to siphon and harvest our energy, to, basically battery up artificial timelines. And so things like Gwen towers and HARP and, all these other, mechanisms that they use are to keep, that inversion and that reversal grid alive. It connects to the mothers of darkness. It connects to ritual abuse. They want to continue to insert suffering and, trauma into the earth grid so that the earth itself, can't really ascend and it's in lockdown. We see geoengineering. We see the way that Mother Earth has been treated. Engineered weather, we're engineered humans when we're under the social engineering and mind control. When we begin to break that down and we notice that the earth is doing that as well, everything moves forward. So the reason for this trajectory, which is very ancient in how they wanted to establish the right kind of setup in order to make it, potentially successful, which it isn't, has been, constant world wars, this sort of hidden, covert group, and different events that took place that created, further infiltration. We could, go back to the Khazarians, we could go back to the Anunnaki and the Dracos and, the deeper galactic history. The whole point is, people can get lost in all that. It's either, you're here for unity, consciousness, for healing, for transformation, for awakening, because this planet was set up for soul retrieval and has a lot to do with the Sophionic fall and her returning to the Christos and returning to her higher self. But the planet got so inverted and these reversal grid technologies and the infiltration got so bad that the 13th tone and remedial flame had to come in. And that's representative of the 13th sign. And this is something that they rigged the system to not allow in. And that's why the architecture of the Illuminati uses the number 13 families. Mm-hmm. And it's all dark mother reversal grid energy that has kept us in imbalance with the masculine and feminine and defenses and seals. It's a lot to, try and explain, but the whole reasoning is because this is a free will universe kind of experiment. And if the creation of ego, had a choice, had the free will choice to either stay aligned with source or turn to like this false light, negative ego persona that we see in narcissistic type personalities, energy vampires, and people that are walking amongst us, right? They are a living micro example of, somebody who has made that choice, because we have the choice every day to be better people, right? So that force, though, it was just a very high creative being that it originally was. And, I don't want to name it Lucifer, but that's what some people might call it. I see it more as a principle versus an entity, that in this free will experiment, that this ego service to self kind of mentality began to hybridize and began to manipulate incarnate consciousness in order to keep the humans that were being seeded disconnected from source and connected to these lower gods or these lower systems that began to break down the true like essence of what Tara represented and Tiamat. So you got the Orion Wars going on, and that was working parallel with what was taking place on Tara, which was already under siege because there was already instability coming out of the Pleroma because of the Christos Sophia and this sort of inversion of the father in symbology of the Lucifer. So the fallen Elohim, fallen Seraphim, and other fallen groups, kind of form this consortium, and the Anunnaki was created to, not all of them are negative, and not all are fallen, to make it very, very difficult for us to fully embody our 12 strand. So they compromise their DNA on purpose. They compromise their DNA and began to mess with the planetary grids because we are a reflection of that. We are a replica of that. Our DNA is connected to the planetary grid. So, down here on Earth, reversal grid energy keeps alive our junk DNA and our dumbed down kind of persona. So this is because they want to be in control. This is because they need a food source. This is also because this is their survival. They can't just redeem overnight. This got so dark and so far that in order to get out of it, it's going to take a lot. So think of all the people that are blackmailed. Think of all the people that have been MyLabbed, abducted, children that were born into it, children that are being dragged out of schools and taken down into tunnels, people that are targeted and chosen to participate in Montauk, right? If you look at how much of this infrastructure of deep state is pulling in a lot of victims and a lot of people against their will, we're not working with cosmic and natural law anymore. We're dealing with something way more sinister and way darker. So basically, if you're vampiric and parasitic, you need to feed on something. And some of the whistleblowers from these families have said, we're an ancient cyborg vampiric race. We require this for food, so have some compassion. It's like, seriously. So I guess the best way to put it is if you can siphon and harvest and use technology to battery up an artificial timeline and put humans on that trajectory, and you maintain the control and the power, then you have an existence. So we're seeing amnesty happening and a lot of people wanting to explain what's happened to them. Victims are telling their stories. People are sharing what they've gone through, whether it's secret space programs or being MyLabbed or being in the entertainment industry at a young age or being trafficked and surviving that. All of this is coming out of the woodworks, which begins to expose the real nefarious forces versus the ones that have been victimized, born into trauma-based mind control families, generation after generation. I mean, this is not, people that are just greedy and doing it because they want power.
Right.
This is like trauma and abuse in order to keep this alive, using millions of people to keep this infrastructure alive, and it's collapsing.
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff. I tell you what, I love every guest we have on here, but I'm already looking forward to going back and watching this again already. Oh. Yeah.
It's so wordy and it's hard to, and I don't always do the best job explaining.
No, it's brilliant. Fascinating stuff.
And the thing is, the only thing that worries me sometimes is that there are people like newbies coming in every day, thank goodness, that want to become awake, that they come in and they're like hearing this and it sounds, but the point is that I think that we need to make is that at this point in time, with where we are, we have all these souls like yourself, like Stu and I, like so many others who were called to come in at this time to help to raise the vibration, to help to build the awareness, because this was a closed system that was very difficult to break for anybody to understand. And anybody, I'd venture to say, throughout any time in history that had an inkling about this was, killed, made to look like they're crazy, and so now we have this whole group that is now here speaking the same language and telling the same stories that will hopefully help raise even more. I mean, they had us so dumbed down and so working for them unknowingly, and right. And it's just, so your great grandfather, um, he saw this, he got it, right? He understood the system that was in control
Yeah.
and knew about these alliances, right, with these off planet, and the being, if you will, that was there as his ally was Val Thor, correct? He was the one who helped him.
Yep. Yep. And remote viewers have said, and many psychic readers, that a lot of times I bumped into synchronistically. Not that I was helped me to understand that time of history and my relationship with Ike during that time as well. So I was around during that time in like different form, connected to actually Valthor and Venusians, and that's kind of beside the point, but that's why I agreed to come in. And he was briefed about that. They intercepted that information and targeted me before birth to steer me onto a Mars timeline, right? So yes, he saw what was going on. He was briefed about the future. He knew that all of us would find each other and come together and speak the truth, that you can't put a lid on human consciousness indefinitely. The power of spirit is strong. The geophysics of the planet and the precession of equinoxes and 26,000 year cycle and this stellar activation cycle that we're currently in, you can't stop it. You can distract people away from it. You can own their creative imagination through manipulation and coercion and fear tactics and trigger events and false flags that keep us in a trauma loop. But the minute you wake up and you begin to move away from that, everything begins to open up. Your capacity to write a better future, be a scriptwriter for your future. Eisenhower absolutely did understand, and I have a really, really special affinity with his. Well, I don't like. I feel such a deep connection with him, and I always have since I was a little kid. Before I even understood he was general and president, I'm like, I mean, he's kind of like appearing to me in military uniform, and then I'm seeing books on the shelf, and I'm like, oh, he's president, he was general of the Second World War, and I'm just trying to process this as a kid. And I was being prepared from the very, very beginning because I was targeted right away, and I couldn't talk to anybody about this at all. It wasn't until later.
Not even in your family, Laura?
I mean, I couldn't really say, some hidden weaponries on me because I didn't even really know. I was blaming myself. I'm like, well, something's seriously wrong with me. I don't know why my nervous system is, kind of the way it is. I feel a tension on me. I just kind of lived with it. And because I was getting communicated with, and I was getting a lot of downloads and a lot of really profound dreams, I started to really get it. Like, okay, I get my mission. I was like 6 or 7 years old. I was really, really starting to get it. So for me, it was like living a double life. I knew they had attention on me. I couldn't explain the weaponry. I couldn't explain that it was connected to a recruitment to Mars or anything about the past. It was just like, he was there. And so were other benevolent guides that just kind of helped me hold it together because it was really, really hard. But he did get it. The thing is, this is not a deep state family. He was raised a farm boy. They barely had any money. 7 brothers, lived close to the land, very, very strict religious, Anabaptist, Mennonite background, German Swiss. So this whole Swedish Jew and a lot of the rumors about him, are not true. So, and he understood very early on, and with the help of Valthor and setting up what he did, like White Hats and Earth Alliance. And it was a carryover from previous, patriot-minded types or, freedom-loving individuals, right? He was very, very aware. So he warned us about the military-industrial complex. And I just, as a family man, getting to know, the Eisenhowers, growing up in the family, having an opportunity to meet Mamie and stay at the Gettysburg Farm when I was a little kid that's now a museum. Just the most beautiful people. So when you see firsthand, and then you see all the rumors, but personally so deeply, how this man was with his family, with his wife, and how much he cared about humanity, it's really difficult because that stuff goes viral, and it's hard to feel, shut down. And I think it matters to this timeline. The most important thing, though, is that we don't let the information become a war amongst each other, because we're all in this together to reclaim our freedoms and sovereignty to the fullest and completest levels. So, if the information begins to get in the way and causes the level of toxicity and hatred that I see it's causing, then we're way off the mark. And that's not what I stand for. That's not what you guys stand for. So I think that's the biggest priority. You know, eventually people will get to the truth when it comes to Ike. You know, if it matters, I hope they do. If it doesn't, then, you know, just be the love. But I think in this time of disclosure, it's really, really important to understand Val, to understand our part, to understand the dark weapons that have been used for thousands and thousands of years to steer us and lead us astray, so that, you know, we can dismantle it from our being. We can begin to transmute and, you know, shift out of all of it, because we are the higher technology. We can connect with that override frequency to begin to dismantle the dark weapons. We are elemental beings. So the geoengineering and all the frequency distortions begin to collapse when we're standing solid in our truth and we're aligned with our soul. Our soul is embodied in our bodies, and we're so if the dark technologies were enough, they wouldn't bother with the social engineering. They would just use the technology. They wouldn't care. They require the mind control and the social engineering for the weapons to even work. That's why when people break that mind control or that divide and conquer mentality or the lower energies that it's trying to pull you into, the minute you break that bond, all of a sudden you begin to dismantle the weaponry. And that's why we don't have to fear it or think it's got any power over us.
Yeah, perfect. Now, I'll just say he was a 5-star general, wasn't he? He was a supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in World War II. So he very, very high up and obviously respected man. Now, did he pass away 5 years before you were born?
1969.
Yeah, that's right. And you born 74, were you?
73.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that you said it was you when you were about 6 or 7 that you sort of knew everything, and those sort of
I
like
didn't know everything. I just knew.
You know what I mean. You sort of
everything.
like you were getting downloads and things like that. But over those first 6 years, what were the stories you were hearing about your great grandfather from was it all beautiful information, all positive stuff? And
it was nothing but positive. I mean, the whole family, and everybody just loves him so much.
Yeah.
You know, my mom and my father, I mean, they spent a lot of time at the White House. My mom, you know, growing up, always had Secret Service men outside her classroom. And she says, well, you're really putting yourself out there. The difference with me is I had Secret Service men protecting me 24/7. With you, you know, she's like, she feels for me. She doesn't quite understand what I'm doing, but she knows, like, you know, if you're a part of this family, you're going to be targeted. Like, and they would threaten Ike. I mean, they, you know, that they'll go after family members. I mean, that's why, he had to play it very carefully. And that's why they were guarding, you know, my mom and her siblings so much. So I just love it because it's always been so down to earth, you know, the Gettysburg Farm, and, you know, just so close to nature. And I love the love stories, or not the love stories, but the love stories, but the love letters he wrote to Mamie are just so beautiful. You just can't even imagine their love. You know, and he's like off, you know, going to, you know, be general of this massive war. And then I remember as a kid, I was very close to my granddad, Ike's son, John S.D. Eisenhower. We would go see him at least twice a year. And he's written about 12, 13 books. And he's fought in wars, and, you know, he's a ambassador to Belgium as well. And that's where my mom and my father met, in Belgium. But his stories were incredible. And he used to whisper to me all sorts of things and tell me little stories. And so one of the stories that I really love was when he was in Belgium. He used to drink. He had to quit. But one morning he was, you know, kind of a little tired from the night before. And my Aunt Mary was there. And he had his bathrobe on, a pair of sunglasses, and his tube socks. And this VW pulls up with a bunch of hippies. And he's like, who are they? Like, what is this? Like, he's starting to notice that there was this movement. And my aunt was like, oh, they're hippies. They're anti-war. They're all about freedom and love and peace. And he goes, oh, I love that. So he goes downstairs, introduces himself, jumps in the VW. My aunt told the story at my granddad's funeral. Son, and then came back, and he said, you know what, if I was not in the position I'm in, I would have been one of them too. And it was just so funny because he could tell, because of my, you know, like, I was going to Dead shows, and I definitely, I don't know, I was kind of ringing the alarm of something he remembered from then, you know, in my teenage years. And he just whispered that to me. And yeah, we were super close. There was something else I was going to say though. I don't know, you know, just just to see how they grew up and what they were exposed to, the amount of pictures you see of, my aunts and uncles and uncle and mom, just sitting on his lap and just being at the White House and riding her tricycle through the halls of the White House, and how much that was a part of her upbringing. And that was so far removed from, my upbringing. It was relatively unimpressive as far as you would never know it was a presidential family. There's no trust funds, there's no inheritances in that way. So we, everybody's had to work really, really hard. And so when you gather with people that are connected to such a profound part of history, and you feel their humbleness and their hardworking nature, and just the love of family, like they love family. Like we don't all have to get along. We just love each other. We don't fully get where everybody's at with things in the world. It doesn't matter because we all have integrity. We have that in common. But I remember looking through the photo albums, and there are pictures of him visiting the concentration camps. There are pictures like really, and I remember just being like so overwhelmed and just so upset and just so sad of, that time in history. And my mom was like, no, you don't want to look at that. You're too young, and there's all these books with a lot of war pictures was just really, really hit me hard. And yeah, so around 6 or 7, I just knew, I know I'm here. I know I'm in this family. I know that it's not about the politics. It's about something else. And I was just comforted by that, even if I didn't fully understand it. And that helped me deal with any kind of targeting or any sort of opposition or weirdness. And it still does to this day. So.
Yeah. Definitely.
So
but sorry, I didn't mean to go on, but I just thought that was a funny story.
No, that's wonderful, because you know what? It humanizes somebody that, is in our history, but also, for those people who don't understand and have negative things to say, it puts a different spin on it that they couldn't possibly know. But I have 2 questions. So the first one is, what if we haven't already said it, I mean, you're not only the great granddaughter with the mission of Dwight D. Eisenhower, but you're also in your own right an astrologer. I mean, you have vast knowledge and information and expertise in astrology. And so my question is for you, from an astrological standpoint, we see that roughly like 2016, 17, right, up until maybe 2020, people started to awaken, right? The Great Awakening. Like, what was it about, from an astrological standpoint, that we all awoke? And of course, some people were awake much before, but I'm talking more mass, like en masse.
Right. Like what are the indications in the astrology?
Yeah, like why did that happen? Like, it's so interesting to me. And more secondary to that question is like, how did we find each other? I mean, that's what I find completely crazy, that many of us grew up in families. They might have been very nice families, like not to put, but they didn't get it. We might have felt like black sheep. We were told we were conspiracy theorists. We were nuts. We were crazy. Who's going to listen to that part, right? And then, of course, the scandemic just kind of brought it more to the forefront, where all of us were like, militantly saying we're not complying. So what is it about that time frame why was it so?
Oh, I love that question. That's really wonderful. Yeah. And this is the thing I also love about the Eisenhowers, real quick, is there's no hierarchy mentality. It's so humble. So it's always been about the larger picture family. Like I always felt that they were, and myself included, felt like we were part of this larger, human family. Like it wasn't just, some presidential family. He didn't see it that way. He never put himself up there. And his message for us now is we're the leaders. We're the ones rising up, right? So anything encoded in our souls that we're born with, is that inner voice, is that intuition, right? We can squash it down. We can lose that connection to our higher self at times, moving through life. The way that the system is set up is very much, whatever's on the television, being, somewhat groomed by whatever's on the television, trends that are out there, the music industry, going to school, having to fit into a box and grades and this and that. And I think a lot of us black sheep are also rebels. I had the worst attendance in my high school. When me and my boyfriend broke up in high school, I was like, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm just not going to go to school anymore. And that was a good reason for me to not want to be there. And I just, and I was told I had learning disabilities and this and that. And I was always in detention. even if I wasn't like bad, I wasn't doing anything bad. I could not fit into that box. So,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of us have this in common, that instead of wearing those stigmas, knowing that that's BS and being able to see through so much crap, and so much distorted history and things that just don't make sense, like junk DNA and just so much that doesn't make sense. I rerouted my life into researching and digging really, really deep. And that's the way I just flowed in my life. And I think, when people like us come together, we have that commonality. It doesn't matter at what point somebody awakens, because it stirs from a very young age. It's just something, you might not bring voice to, you might not know how to articulate it. You might not have, the articulation of, how to unpack something that you already sense. Like I didn't, but now I can put it in a presentation, and there's, certain terminologies that, help explain things like Nephilim reversal grid, or, some other things. So the astrology, because of the reversal grid network, the astrology, is also faced inversion, and aspects in the chart will show, programmings, ancestral patterns, and things that make it very, very difficult for a person to be all that they could be. And this is what we're all struggling with, right? So I do presentations about the inversions and the weaponized zodiac, that societal programmings want to keep us in the lower octave. But there's always transits, and there's always configurations, really powerful ones that people were born with, that literally will not stand for control or new world order. They're not made for it. They're not built for it. So there's that personal thing, certain generations that were born with certain configurations that would absolutely, crush through a lot of the indoctrination and the BS and begin to have voices. So that's encoded in so many of us souls, that we, came in with missions, that we have strong callings, and that nothing is going to be strong enough to silence that. The big thing, though, in this window, though, that made it more on a mass scale is in 2010, the sun started to move through the 13th sign of Fiacus. The 13th sign was something that they kept out. They wanted to keep it out because it's the overtone, and it's the connection to the 0-point unified field. It's what is beyond the veil, beyond the Anunnaki, beyond the reversal grids. It's the 13th sign is symbolic, or a mirror of that showing up in the zodiac. And what it represents is the ether element. So when you look at the satanic symbolism of the pentagram going in the ground, that ether energy is symbolic of the devil, the satanic networks, the inversions, the dark mother reversals, all of that. That's the symbology of the ether going into the ground, which means that something, is holding the power, and that is being suppressed or kept from us. And this is why they invert symbols. So the Venus transits have formed a perfect pentagram in the sky, which are the Sophionic corrections that astronomers and astrologers have noted, that it forms a perfect pentagram. And that, to me, is the unconditional love of the mother seeking to return to her body, because these reversal energies kept even the mother consciousness force, world soul, from occupying her physical body, which is very rare for a planet to have divine mother, reclaim her body, which is actually ascension, which is what the 13th sign represents. So the Venus transits have created the corrections for the mother arc to anchor back into the earth, to begin to heal the planetary grids, along with the grid workers that were born. So the grid workers have helped to repair the grids. People, without realizing it, are doing grid work when they're living in their truth. You go to a location, you feel called to a location, you might feel emotions come up or something move through you, but you're actually helping to collapse the reversal grid network. So that has taken place. And this 13th sign is ruled by ether. And so the correction of the pentagram going upright again, the reversal grid energies put the ether element in reversal. So it wasn't just the symbology and their attention on the symbology. The dodecahedron platonic solid representing ether was put in reversal. It was called reversal 55. It was actually a technology to keep that circulation from being available, which is why we age so fast, which is why disease is such a common thing, which is why mental illness, broken relationships, all the problems of our society have gotten so out of hand, because that energy was literally locked out. So we would only be functioning on, belief systems that fed us a little bit, but not true source energy or true regenerative power from the earth itself that could help us or allow us to live thousands of years or hundreds of years. So if you cut all that off, we're like, okay, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, that's our lifespan. That's not our true lifespan. This junk DNA, the checkerboard mutation coming from the Nibirian diotic crystal grid technology as well. So all that symbology of inversion in 2010, when the sun started to move through the 13th sign again, that ether element was opened. The grid work had already reached an incredible like stage of repair. The Venus transits had reached enough cycles for the mother energy to land back in the planet. So now that you have that force, people, all of a sudden feel this alignment or feel this connection that begins to alchemize or break down a lot of the programmings. They start to see anomalies and things that just don't feel right, because the tuning fork of the physical vessel is starting to vibrate at such a higher level that all of a sudden, what you used to believe in starts to feel like bullshit, or starts to feel really wrong in your space. And that's why the medical industry has pushed pharmaceuticals, because don't look at that pain. Don't look at that discomfort. You're just depressed. You're just anxiety ridden. You just have issues. Take this drug, because they know the physical symptoms are bringing us closer to truth, because it's our body saying something's wrong. These programmings don't fit in my body, because truth does. Connection to Mother Earth does. And that's why there's rapid healing taking place. So that whole industry is collapsing in this awakening time. And I think a lot of people are awakening, but they're catching up with the information part of it, because it's so painful for people to see the level of depravity and darkness. But now it's everywhere. You just go up on YouTube and victims, survivors, SRA, it's everywhere. People are talking. The Diddy thing, the Epstein thing, this is all out of the bag. You cannot put a lid back on everything that's been exposed. Right. So the chain reaction is growing. It'll continue to grow. But that, as far as the planetary configurations, we've also had lots of conjunctions, Pluto moving into Aquarius, Uranus moving into Taurus, the whole currency thing shifting, and you're very involved in that, in the QFS or
QFS, yeah.
So all these changes, it's the planetary system knows how to heal its own body, just like our higher self knows how to heal us. So we're at a stage of Earth history where the planetary system and the alignments that have happened, its own cosmic intelligence has set up the conditions for the mother energy to reclaim her body. So the Akamoth, the fragmented Sophia, connecting with the 13th tone, which is a remedial flame coming from source itself, is that 13th sign that literally is bringing us out of a sort of program version and bringing us more into the Christos, the Christ, the true essence of Christ, and the Magdalene, right? If people want some names connected to it, but our divine blueprint of the divine masculine and feminine that are our true parents, our true divine inheritance, Mother, Father, God. So the mother, returning to reclaim her body, is in oneness with the Father. There's no, people that are Christian minded, they're already like, very much there, but there's so much more to the story when it comes to the mother is all. And how that relates to the geophysics of the astrology. And so I use it as not a predictive tool, but more, all right, where are the inversions? Where are the programs? Here's the area of your chart that shows where the activations or the growth periods and initiations exist or reside, so that when you begin to go through them, you don't have to panic and freak out and think, you're losing your mind. Because a lot of it, people go through without understanding the information, and they mistake it for a nervous breakdown. They mistake it, the underworlds and the transformational journey, as you feel like you're going to die or you don't want to be here anymore. But they don't realize, just breathe through it, because it's actually, you're releasing something huge. People don't realize how much they're actually deprogramming, because they're so caught in the symptoms that they want to run from it and they miss out. But I think that's all going to change.
Well, I find it very interesting that today, the last few years, and I know it's a combination of stuff, but I find it very interesting that this generation of kids, let's say I don't know, 12 to 20, something like that, in that range, so many of them are suffering from anxiety and depression. And so obviously, how many of these kids are on anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications? However, that's a whole other conversation. But what I'm saying is, it's not an accident that all these kids coming in are having this message. Like, there's something that is rocking them. And like you said, the symptoms of anxiety and panic are, you do want to just get rid of that. It's very uncomfortable to work through it, or to call upon God and say, it's okay, like, help me through this. Don't let this get the best of me, so I could just breathe through it. Right. And, anyone I've suffered from panic, it's awful. I mean, I can't think of anything worse. You literally think you're going to die, and your body has a lot of really weird reactions. So I think,
yeah.
What's that?
Oh, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because what it says is these kids that are coming in are so much more, there's so much more, their frequency is so much higher, and they're operating in a different way than maybe 40, 50 years ago when we were coming in. And the system wants to suppress all that rather than allow, which I know it's all collapsing, but the beauty, that you see, like these kids that are coming in and carrying, it's so sad, but we know how that's even more a part of this great awakening, by this, not just us, the souls that are remembered, what we're supposed to remember, but the ones that came in knowing it already.
Oh, I know, right? And then this gender confusion. They know kids are coming in really connected, both their masculine and feminine side, that integration of the masculine and feminine that we carry within our vessels. We call upon our masculine side and our feminine side, all, and some have a predominance of more masculine signs that could be in a female body, but it doesn't mean that they should become a man because of it. It's like we have access to both, and that integration is how we begin to dissolve the seals and fences that have kept us from the fullness of our DNA, which actually holds the higher gamic union of the divine mother and father, or the Christ Sophia. It's all encoded with the higher spiritual multidimensional. Yeah. So to keep, that in lockdown when children are very born with more switched on, or to create confusion about it is a weaponization of what they're bringing in, because they're bringing in a lot more less programmed versions of how we could relate to the masculine and feminine instead of the ones that we're taught. We're coming out of the Barbie Ken era, and then their generation comes and it's like they think, this is progressive, or I don't know. They're rebelling against the programming and entering a new program. So, and yes, so the anxiety is very much the downloads of the higher self wanting to get in. But if you have no avenue to express it, then the body either internalizes it and creates anxiety, or you feel this vacancy because you can't really, bring it in, or you might fear it. You might fear the upgrade or the light that it brings. Because it's an electrical energy connected to Uranus, connected to the higher mind, if we want to look at it in planet and sign form. But, besides that, it's just Uranus impacts the nervous system. We don't have to make it about the planet, but the nervous system, the electrical energy, the magnetic, the Pluto, the plutonic, the magnetic, the electric magnetic spectrum, right? That spectrum of frequency is widening, the multidimensional nature of things. So when anxiety comes, it has to have an outlet. It has to find movement. It has to, express. And so this is what's so important. We need, the proper counselors, because you're not going to have a counselor saying, oh, you're on a starseed mission. Okay. You shouldn't sit in class. Like, why don't you go out back, go climb that tree and just sing some songs and, play with the birds and the animals and grow some food for lunch, so we don't have to eat this cafeteria slop. People aren't being placed where they belong. They're being put in a box, and it's an epidemic of mental, emotional, illness, not because the children are ill, because the system is sick.
Yeah.
And then it pushes its drugs, and then, it's hard for them to get off of it. It creates a lot of imbalance in the brain and dependency. And there are herbs, because I used to never go to the hospital, but sometimes my panic attacks were so bad, I thought I was dying. And there are some incredible herbs that have really helped me, like saffron and skullcap and apigenin and, magnesium. And people are probably listening like, why don't you pop one right now? You talk too fast. But but nature and Mother Earth holds everything we could possibly need to deal with this stuff, and to help find a better flow of energy to because these are all important things that are coming through. I bet when you were having those panic attacks, there was a lot that wanted to be expressed, maybe. I don't know.
Well, and of course, it's very easy to look at, well, this happened in my childhood or that happened, right? But my theory is always like, not to minimize what people have gone through, but it has to go deeper than that. Do you know what I'm saying? There's an energy disconnect, and people, we're so cut off. And of course, the medical industry and the psychiatric industry, it's so has such blinders on that you're never going to hear a traditional doctor or therapist say, well, let's examine, where your soul might be right now, or,
what trauma
what your mission. Yeah. Like, let's put aside what mom and dad did just for a second, and let's just look at your own mission, and let's just figure out like why you're here and what your ancestors like that because that doesn't make sense. That's all BS. It's very cut what they feel like. It's cut and dry. Well, if you're having this symptom, we could treat it with this pill.
No, it's horrible. I mean, imagine, and this is the beauty of astrology, and I know it's been demonized and projected upon, and there are inversions and things about that. But imagine if you were to look at a chart of a child, and know exactly, what their gifts are, what their passions are, instead of trying to get them to do calculus or algebra and that they might never use. And we don't get to know our children, and we need to be guardians because they are our future. We need to help them to be the best that they came here to be. And it has to change, and we still have a long ways to go. But you haven't said anything in a while, Stu. So what's your?
Well, I was just going to say, I've got a very similar story to you. I didn't split up with the boyfriend, though, thankfully. But I was the only one that went to grammar school from my primary school. Kept my head down for the first couple of years, but in my third year, I just this overwhelming feeling of this is all absolute bullshit. Right? It was a history lesson, and I knew it was a nonsense, but it took me another 20 years to start understanding why, But yeah,
totally.
a little bit put there.
Yeah. And when you catch up with it, it's like, see, when I started to listen to my depression, my anger, why I felt the way I did, when I actually gave it the respect it deserved, that's when I found my mission, and that's when I reconnected to my childhood of, what was coming through and the downloads. Once I was locked into the school system enough and I realized how much it was really hurting me, I said, okay, I want the pain to talk to me. And then it revealed like all the download, and I started writing. And that's when I recovered my sanity and my truth.
Well, I just started researching. That was after 9/11. But yeah, and once I really started learning about history and the truth of the world, I was captivated, and it's been nearly 25 years I've been doing this, but I absolutely love it, and this is amazing. So, did you have another question, Lisa? Or
I did actually, and just to just finish that thought, I also think like for parents, they're in an echo chamber. See, that's why the voices that we bring and the podcasts and the information is so important to break through that. If you're in a system with school and doctors, there's nowhere else to go unless you have intrinsically you feel that way. And so you're looking at what your best friend did with their kid. Well, their kid was depressed, so they went to the psychiatrist and they got medicated, and now they're better, and they're doing so much better in school, and they're focused. And so that's the whole point of trying to silence, and so important to have for us to just keep banging on, to just keep talking about this stuff and waking up more and more people, because the soul connection is never talked about. It's a taboo subject. It's not something that comes into play ever when it comes to when kids or even adults are going through difficult times, and that could very well be a spiritual crisis, not because of what happened when I was 10, or like physiologically, they're prone to anxiety and all this BS that we hear. Yeah. But my other question was, and I know you have some stuff you want to talk about to kind of bring it all back to the here and now, but you kept mentioning about this Mars recruitment. So just, as short as you need, as long, like, what was that about? Why was it there? What was the point? Like, can you just speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's kind of long and involved. I don't know if we're going to do any slides today. I don't know if we have enough time.
We have as much time as we need. It depends on your schedule.
Oh, okay. Well, gosh. Well, thank you for having me. I'm just really enjoying this conversation. And yes, I just wanted to speak to anxiety too. Trauma is also lodged in the nervous system. And so that's, another reason if that's not being expressed. But yeah, very often, just the uniqueness of a person's, own higher intelligence coming through. It's just so silenced. It's so silenced. You're not participating when you're in class. Yes, you can raise your hand and ask questions, but how much, is somebody sharing the intelligence that's just naturally moving through them.
Not
It's
at
just
all.
like crazy that you think you can just mold a child and turn them into something. They're already something that needs to just have the room to breathe and grow and be their authentic self. So I just wanted to say that. But the Mars recruitment, yeah, that was really weird. So I mean, I always felt that weird energy on me. And so I mean, it's part of a timeline manipulation, right? Uh, they utilize looking glass technologies to locate me and a person in a past life that I had a sacred union relationship with. And I know this is going to sound crazy to people, but this is what ended up being revealed and uncovered from, sources. And okay, so this group called the Aviary, they were behind this, right? So, and basically in 2006, I was approached to go to Mars, but it didn't happen like overnight. And this was the person who approached me that they located me with in a past life, that they were able to bring into their world, the Aviary. And so they began to manipulate him. So when I met him, though, I immediately just took to him and he took to me. But I didn't realize he was sent specifically to find me. I thought we just met in this organic way. I had felt this control force on me my whole life. But then I didn't always consider it a targeting. Like I said, I blamed myself a lot. I'm like, I don't know what this is. It just doesn't feel like it's coming from me. Maybe it's just bad karma. Like what is this? Because it keeps tripping me up, or just plants were showing up in my life. And then, it's been communicated to me that they engineered a lot of events to try and trip me up purposely. So I was like, okay, I'm not as messed up as I thought. So yeah, in 2006 though, after all this tripping me up to reroute me so that I would be in an easier position for them to pull me in.
Throat chakra.
Yeah. So because, so all the events leading up to it were to collapse certain things that I was trying to pursue in life so that I would be rerouted, in their direction to, meet with this man, which I eventually did. So in 2006, that's when I actually met him. And so we hit it off right away. And to make a long story short, because it's a long story, over the course of time, he proposed to me, that we were going to travel to a base on Mars, built through, which I found out later, hidden black budget projects. And it was a survival plan connected to Alternative 3. Alternative 3 was something presented to the Eisenhower administration. So this was part of the warning that my great grandfather gave about, and these are the timeline wars, right? And it didn't make sense to me because I knew my mission. I knew my mission was on Earth. Why would we need to go to a survival colony? Well, his explanation was, cataclysms and all sorts of events are going to happen. We need to get out of here. And trying to make me feel like you should be happy, that you've been chosen. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. And because I already understood the skies are being sprayed. I already had a grasp on geoengineering. I knew that a lot of these were engineered events. And it started to make sense that, I had been targeted, because, but this all kind of came later, right? So in the very beginning, I'm just thinking, oh, he's telling me about this trip to go to Mars. And I'm like, this is probably way in the future. He's just talking to these scientists and these interesting people. And it's something, not so hush hush or secretive. It's something that the whole human race is probably going to find out about. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until later, he's like, you can't tell anybody. This is all very much just for a select few. That's when the red flags, kept coming up. And then I would notice that he would get phone calls and disappear for days and not remember where he went. I'm like, and he would refer to a handler. And actually his handler is in the new Age of Disclosure documentary, Hal Puthoff. I might as well just say it. I've already said it publicly before. And that was his handler, right? And I'm not saying they're all bad guys. It's just when you're dealing with compartmentalism, when you're being convinced that this is the right thing to do, and they were convincing him, then okay. But the Aviary, this group, is actually connected to the dark weapons. So I don't know which ones are involved and which ones aren't, because it's a group of military men and individuals that were considered interested in UFOs, telepathy, and mind control, psychotropic weapons. But their cover story was not the darker parts that I just said. It was remote viewing. It was, some people from the Stanford Research Institute. So later on, I found out that this group, which I sensed because I felt that the encounters that my partner was having, not just disappearing for days, he was having ET contact. He said that they brought him in because they were curious about that contact experience. And this group was known for wanting to study the UFO ET phenomenon. But actually, the aviary is connected to my labs and artificial telepathy. So they engineered this whole scenario that he mistook for something legit. And he was getting communications about us going to Mars. So they were thinking that he was having contact with a group of ETs that were going to help us to get there, when they kind of set up the theater as an engineered version. That because I could just tell, this is because you would refer to them as patrons. Like, these are higher ETs. This is what they want for us. That this is how we're going to protect the human genome by going off planet. And I'm like, well, what about the surface population? Are they just going to be vulnerable? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, well, it matters to me. Anyway, so later on, it was validated that this group is connected to mind control, psychotronic weapons. They've been my labs, black ops, drugging, harassment, and implanting false alien abduction memories in people. And this validated what I suspected. And I got out of it immediately because I never wanted to go. And after we got married and I moved to North Carolina, before we got married, they had dropped the whole thing, or he wasn't talking about it that much. This is before I knew the dark side of it all. And once I started living with him, that's when it got real loud. And I kept refusing. I said, wait a second, why is this so hush hush? That's when the darker part started to unfold. Sorry, I'm telling this terribly. But anyway, so I'm in North Carolina. I'm living with him. And this is when I really noticed bizarre behavior. He was bleeding from all orifices, and he was wafting like radiation from some kind of like military or ET kind of thing. I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on with him. And then when he said, you know what, when I met you at that gathering, they sent me as on a mission to bring you in. And one night he had to unplug all batteries, all electronics, took the power sources or batteries out of cell phones, computers. And he said, okay, I'll tell you something. They know why you're here and what you're here to do. And he exposed, that they know my mission. They knew. Then I found out that Eisenhower was briefed that I was coming in, that they intercepted that, targeted me. And a defector told me that part later. But he said, they know your mission and they want to take you because you're valuable. And he didn't make it sound scary, but he said, I will admit to you that I didn't meet you in the organic way. And then that's later on, I found out they used looking glass technologies. They knew we had a union. They knew that I wouldn't just fall for anybody, that it needed to be bait. It needed to be somebody I had a natural love for, and that I might have met in the organic way if they hadn't tampered with him, that we might have, been a real union. But it wasn't just that to use as bait. They wanted our sacred union codes, because sacred union is the biggest threat on this planet. Is love, is relationships coming together, is the healing of the masculine and feminine. Or they wanted to just use that, or I don't know. It's all a long story, but I got out of it. I got out of it pretty quick, and I couldn't get him to want to join me. And basically, it's a survival colony. And my whole deal was, if they can engineer events, if they can engineer cataclysms, if they can manipulate weather, then then this is all part of a fake artificial timeline. We don't need to evacuate Earth. My call for global awakening and my understanding of ascension overrode what any of them could have possibly said to me to convince me it was a good idea. So when they realized that I wasn't going to go with him, and they realized that they could use the bait of somebody that I was previously in love with to try and get me there, and that didn't work, it was like, wow. And then the targeting got even worse. It got really bad. And
on you, the targeting on you?
Basically my kids were pretty young then. And I was getting out of the relationship, and we did a Celtic handfast wedding. So we weren't like, it's a year and a day you get married. And we only lasted like 6 months. But once I left, that's when Alfred Lambermont Weber, Michael Sala started to contact me, like in 2006, 2007. And then I became public, and I exposed the aviary, what they were up to. And I started to share names, and boy, did that the targeting got better after I started talking. Like it lessened, because I realized, okay, we can't corner her. We can't so I knew that it was actually, I had to expose it. I mean, not just for my safety, but because the human race needs to know that this is going on. Of course, that was number one. But I wasn't like anxious to put myself out there. I just said to God, if I need to come forward, just help line this up for me. And it lined up in the most miraculous way. I was sending an email to a friend, and it accidentally sent to Alfred Lambermont Weber. And Alfred Lambermont Weber, for no reason, and like I hadn't talked to him for years, because he was one of the first people I talked to. This is 2010, 3 years later. It accidentally sent to him. He goes, I think it's time that I interview you. And that was my first interview ever. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of complicated, but basically, long story short, it's just a timeline that represented a survival colony, a bunch of people going there, alternative 3, also people going underground, compromising the human population, whether that's depopulation or whatever. I'm sure, because that's what they kind of want. But it just smelled of deep state. And even though the aviary cover occupations and stories and the way they presented themselves publicly did not show any of these nefarious things, you couldn't even Google it, because I was researching for weeks. I'm like, I know these guys are dark. I couldn't find any dirt on them, except for the Paul Benowitz story was connected somehow to one of them. And then boom, I opened the vaults and I found information that they had wiped from the internet. And then years later, that website came out, and they were investigated, and it was a defector, I think, who exposed all of them, that said gang stalking, MyLabs, artificial telepathy. And I'm like, thank God, because that explains everything. Before, I couldn't find anything until that one story, and then it all started to make sense. My dreams were more prophetic than ever. I had a dream that I went up in a ship. God, the voice of God from the sky, just said, make a choice. You got to make a choice. And I said, I'm staying on Earth. And so I flew out of the ship that had taken me. He was on it, a bunch of military looking guys with black, I don't know. And anyway, I landed in the water, and I'm like, oh, but Richard didn't come with me. So I tried to fly back up and get him to come. And then lightning and thunder struck, and the ship kind of went off, and I landed in the water, and I realized he's not going to come, which ended up being true. But when I told him that, that's when everything went crazy, because you shouldn't have told me that. People started to get killed. His parents, later on, it was so bad because they realized there's no way we're going to be able to get her, because they figured there's going to be, it doesn't matter how much she says she's not going to go. Because he did tell me too, he says, if you don't go, they're going to take you anyway. So when I had that dream and it was so powerful, and I told him that, energetically, he knew that there was just no way. But there were webcams all over the place, and they were monitoring everything. So they had like intercepted that information and heard, because then he disappeared, and he would just disappear. So I have no idea. I felt like and they all had code names, bird names, penguin, owl. And so I felt like I was trapped in a Batman movie. It was so bizarre, you guys.
But were you scared, Laura?
I had the the fierceness of, being a mother really, really helped, because I'm like, you're not going to mess with my kids. It was just like, you can't mess with me. There was a strength that I had in that time that I don't have every day. It was like, it's sort of like if you're in danger and you can like lift a car up, and all of a sudden, and I was running a lot of adrenaline. I wasn't scared for some reason. I was just like, finally, now I get to interface with the people that have been targeting me, because this is what it, all had to do with. And for some reason, I just found it not scary at all. Because I don't know, because this was my opportunity to break free, and the excitement in me was stronger than the fear to finally, get away from all of this and make my sovereign choice. And I felt empowered because I knew my mission very, very strongly, and the cost of what it would mean if I were to go, and how much it helped. That contrast helped me to, fight harder and stand stronger for informing the world of these dark technologies and artificial timelines and social engineering and Eisenhower's administration, and how this all connects. I knew that was what was going to come, and that they couldn't get me.
Wow.
Although we haven't been in your situation, I believe Elisa and I both feel like that as well. We're just so positive and comfy on this outcome, because it's just a faith and a knowing, isn't it, in this God source energy, and you're fighting on the right team,
Exactly, because that's when the feeling of God and presence and Christ and guides and the mother energy, it was all like, I know that Ike was really helping me through that time too. And I know that there were ways to just really calm me down and just, yeah, my love for my, kids. And I knew that, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And then I said to them, because there was threads, because I thought that they were good guys, because then they were starting to bring me in. My friend wanted to go to Mars, and it was only like a few people were allowed, just my closest friend. And I was just, I was like, no. I'm like, and I kept telling her, this is what I'm noticing. This is what I'm seeing. And he just told me that he was sent, that they sent him to find me. They were tracking me. It wasn't just some organic thing, and we're being brought into some survival colony, and we're just blessed. And we've, been chosen because him and I fell in love, and he's going to take his wife and girlfriend to this survival colony. It was so much deeper, and it pulled into this pre-targeting before birth. I found out more and more over the years of the depth of all of this. But I wrote to them in the group. I said, after I exposed them, Hal Puthoff said, "Oh, been outed again." And then I guess some of the group wanted to kind of be friendly with me because they didn't want to look like the bad guys. And I didn't consider all of them the bad guys, but they got their hands on some weaponry, and they're connected to MJ12. I later found out, and then it was validated with that article about the dark technology they use. So are all of them involved? Well, I don't think my partner was, because they had him fooled. And there's compartmentals. They weren't going to tell him everything. Right. They made him feel like a hero. But I told them all, I'm like, what's the word? What are you going to kill me? Because I'll just reincarnate even more pissed off if you ever try and fuck with me or my kids again. So they were just, they didn't like my laughter and my levity and the fact that they couldn't get any fear out of me. But it's funny because there's other things that I freak out about, like going into Costco or like, like Mars recruitment, nah. But like just doing, I don't know.
No, it makes sense. Very, very amazing story. And I love that you said like that because they couldn't get the fear.
Yeah.
That was very, very key. Maybe you weren't aware of it per se consciously, but isn't that what they thrive on? And that's what they try to keep us in, because that's how they control us.
Yeah. And I think they were involved with some kind of dark, because there was definitely more before I went public, a lot of energy being cast on me because they were monitoring. And he said, there's webcams, they're tapping our phones. And I mean, it was very, because we're talking like real military physics. I mean, these are deep state players, big time. And Ron Pandolfi, I mean, people that are connected to the 3-letter organizations. And I know all their names. And when you look them up, you'll see the associations with these 3-letter organizations. But I remembered, driving, I'd have to stop the car and I would lay down on the grass, and it's like my heart. So many times I felt like I was going to leave my body and die. And I knew that these were, attacks. But that's the thing, that's where, fear and panic, feed it, and love and trust and grounding make it better. But it was really rough. It was rough. I mean, I wouldn't say that, every day I felt light. I was more angry than anything else because I felt like my life kept getting sabotaged and robbed. But I'm like, but this is the mission. This is the bigger picture mission. So, but, and that's what's been amazing about, meeting everybody, just working together. We all are here for the same reason, and the same goals and what we want to see in humanity. And, but yeah, I mean, a lot of time I'm like, what in the earth or world did I get myself into and sign up for before coming here? It's like, geez. Like, are you sure you picked the right person for this mission? Because, but I'm here and I'm breathing. So I guess,
Perfect. I think a lot of us found that in COVID as well, didn't we? The fact that we were just not getting involved in any of it. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing this and everything. People could see that we weren't afraid, and they left us alone. And it was just, we were treated different to other people because as soon as you showed that fear, right, that was when they were on you. Security guards in supermarkets and things like that. No, I'm not doing it. And they just left you alone.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. It's just like, they thrive on that. They know that we can't think clearly. Well, in that fight or flight response. And they can convince people of things, and that's their tactic, is trauma loops. And then people, freak out. And what's crazy, it's not just, some deep state or it really runs the world. It's been running the world. and it's more enormous than people can imagine. And but it's crumbling. The control system is crumbling, and whatever about fake alien invasion or whatever else they're going to pull out of their pocket, there's too many experts, there's too many awakened people. They'll be able to see through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, I mean, that was the big testing ground, right? And it was very personal, had to do with health, had to do with protecting one another. It was playing on all the good characteristics that people have. It was weaponizing that, the good nature of people, wanting to do the right thing, and the fear that people felt and the choices that they were making. It really showed, how, of what level of awakening one's at, not the spiritual awakening, because there's a lot of spiritual people that are beautiful souls, that are awakened to that high integrity, but they haven't awakened enough to see how corrupt all of this actually is. And I really, really feel for them, because that's a tough one. Yeah. But at the same time, it's frustrating. And I know we all get frustrated because it's just like, it just keeps them alive. And, it's like wanting to warn your best friend of an abusive partner that's cheating, and they refuse to see the red flags. It's like,
yeah, I was saying, I was with someone today, and it was that kind of thing. But, we just have to let them awaken at their own time. And if they have trouble, then be there to comfort. So tell us about these slides, because this brings us into a little bit of the here and now, right?
Yeah, and remember my father, 9 booster shots. He was on his deathbed in hospice, and he just took good herbs and green food and let go of the fear, stopped listening to his doctors. And I'm about to visit him in Florida, and he's flying and going out to lunch every day with his friends. And the thing is, we de-weaponize the bioweapons when we move out of the attachments we have to some of the things that they've hooked people's minds in on, the dependency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the slides, I don't know about showing every single one of them, but
I'll put the first one up, and then you can I'll skip through whatever you want to do.
Yeah, because it's a lot to read. But Dan Cooper, and I think people will be able to replay this, right? So they can take their time with the slides.
Of course, yeah,
because it might be better. It's like, okay, almost like people can read themselves, but this is the person that I've been talking about. And what he said about whistleblowers that have mentioned that Ike signed treaties is that they weren't given the top secret information. The positions that they were in, they didn't get full access to the 30 levels above the president. So whatever they were told, they're blowing the whistle about, thinking that it's what actually happened. But they're very strategic in making sure that whistleblowers even believe that Eisenhower signed treaties. So Dan, who has immunities and never signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, is the one that helped to expose the truth about Eisenhower not signing treaties. So you guys can read, a bit about his bio. He actually was in Dark Fleet, served a 20 and back. And he got his information, a lot of information from that experience. Here he says these 2 Nazi SS officers related and often bragged about their personal participation in the Battle of DC, July 19th, 1952, where the Nazis defeated the United States and forced them to surrender unconditionally to them. So he is a physicist on the level of like Tesla. He claims that his personal knowledge of the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and 8th fundamental force of nature guided him in ferreting out the actual historical developments of the technologies employed in the unacknowledged secret access programs of the United States. He is actually the senior advisor to the Earth Alliance. And because he said Eisenhower, set that up, and Ike's force, USMC Special Section military unit, actually saved his life multiple times. So he has very direct experience with all of this. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, and he also, the league lawyer, did a lot of cases. Anyway, so according to Dan Cooper, 1952, July 19th, 36 Warp 1 Nazi craft hovered for 6 hours over the Capitol. 600 troops made all Congress signed ceasefire agreements. 600 Nazi troops were beamed down into the Capitol from 36 of their Warp 1 capable spaceships, armed to the teeth. They took all of Congress by force of arms that day. Harry S. Truman was the president who actually surrendered the United States to the Nazis on July 19th, 1952. But he did not do it alone. Truman was not the only one to sign that unconditional surrender agreement with the Nazis. The Nazis insisted that every single member of Congress sign it, which they all did on that day. The Nazis also insisted that a number of prominent U.S. businessmen also sign it. So we're dealing with UFO flyovers, okay? Advanced technology. Admiral Byrd was shaken when he went to Antarctica and saw the technology that they had. So this wasn't something that this wasn't something anybody wanted. It's just we didn't have the military capability to fight them. So anyway, next slide. So Ike had no choice but to openly comply with this official instrument of surrender, the unconditional surrender of the United States to the Nazis, because it was put into law that you would be imprisoned. You know, and there were death threats. I mean, you just couldn't outwardly oppose it. But he opposed the instrument of surrender of 52 secretly by establishing various military and civilian covert units for that purpose. One of them was Ike's Force, also known as the United States Marine Corps Special Section, or USMC, which survives today. In fact, that U.S. military unit is the most successful military unit opposing the interplanetary corporate conglomerate Nazi draconian empire today by far. He ordered the first attack on the Greys, deep underground military base at Dulce, New Mexico, knowing that he would lose that battle just to learn more about the enemy and to test their best against them. They, the U.S. Army Rangers, also the Green Berets, lost 30-1 back then. This battle at the deep underground military base of the Greys occurred more than a decade before the one reportedly to have occurred in 1969. And that's what Phil Schneider was a part of and talks about, and was a much larger engagement. We never hear about this, though. Why? Because they don't want anybody to see what Ike was all about. Several thousand U.S. Special Forces troops engaged against the Greys forces then, and nearly half of them lost their lives in that action. So that's the same year they're blaming him for signing treaties. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And this guy would know, you know, and he doesn't want anything for sharing this information. He didn't even seek me out. He started sharing this in a thread, and I'm like, can you please write me? And he actually said the Temporal Management Command, you know, Chronovision or whatever, looking into the future, they knew we were going to work together. He already knew that we were going to work together. So Andrew Bashago of Project Pegasus, they were talking about me before I was even born, because I was majorly targeted, because they knew that Eisenhower was briefed that I was coming in, that I would expose this stuff. So that's why they want me out of the picture. I mean, I'm just a messenger, right? It's just, okay, next slide. Ike also established the White Hats, the first of which were Texan U.S. generals and admirals. That's where the name White Hats came from. Ike's White Hats are the ones that brought Ronald Reagan into their fold right after the ICC Nazi Draco alliance had him shot in March 1981 for attempting to disclose the SSP fully. Ike was the one that first appealed to the Sphere Being Alliance, also the Guardians, to put up the impenetrable outer barrier and 8th Force energy field around our solar system, which they ended up doing December 14, 2014. So that actually was done in that year, because that was a year that 90% of the population had already been sold to the slave trade off planet, larger picture off in the 1930s. 90% of the population was already going to be sold off. So the fake alien invasion of 2014 was supposed to deliver that. And I'm like, Dan, how could they deliver that many people? That doesn't make any sense. And he explained it to me. He's definitely somebody we might all want to have on the show together, because there's so many questions to ask him. Anyway, it was another civilian unit that Ike set up to continue to petition the Sphere Being Alliance for their assistance that eventually did convince them to intervene on our behalf. The Guardians first approached Dan in 1975, so he presumed that's when they first took up residence in the solar system. So there was an appeal, and then over the course of time, you know, they intervened. But the thing is, the Guardians and Guardian Souls were a part of the Emerald Order and the Paladorian Covenant. I mean, this is an ancient agreement that just needed to have different events take place in order to help bring it through. So it wasn't like Ike, you know, called it in. It was already going to come in, but you know, just like when we invoke a connection with our higher self, or we call something in that's there, we have to, you know, we have to ask, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the initiation on a human level to bring in the inevitability of this ascension timeline, right? So just like us, we had to take certain steps in our lives in order to get on the path that we are, even though it was inevitable that we'd wake up, you know? So this was just an important thing to implant in the most inverted part of this system, which is the government infiltrated by deep state. So there had to be a person in his position to begin to do this in order to begin to you know, help the rest of us navigate it, because it was very clear to him, we're the powers that be. We're going to take down the deep state. It's us humans that are remembering who we are that are doing it, right? Because he was not into the government structure. So, but, this administration we're in right now, is important as a stepping stone to what's to come. So anyway, next slide.
Yeah, I've heard a few people lately, Josh Reed and quite a few others, saying that they're quite quietly confident that they think Trump's going to start exposing some of this, and we're going to see some sort of exposure pretty soon. But there's so much information coming out about this now, isn't there?
Right. And this is going to be an important piece in disclosure. And the thing is, if this isn't a part of it, and we keep hearing about the Greada Treaty, oh my God, I can't stand it anymore. It was Ike that established the Earth Alliance. If it weren't for him, there wouldn't be an Earth Alliance today in the position to defeat the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance. So also Dan Cooper. And then that reminds me of something that Corey Good said a long time ago. Earth Alliance. The Earth Alliance has been working in the shadows to undo the cabal's efforts to plunge humanity into an internal darkness of massive depopulation and open technocratic rule. Members of the Earth Alliance have infiltrated the militaries of the United States, China, Russia, and other countries. And insider Corey Good has unequivocally stated that the Earth Alliance has supported President Donald Trump since the beginning of his candidacy. Military Industrial Complex Secret Space Program. While the members of the Earth Alliance, the Global Galactic League of Nations, and even the Cabal all agree that the secrets of the clandestine space programs, extraterrestrial contact, and suppressed technologies should be disclosed to the people of the world, there is some contention over how this feat should be accomplished. So, Ike did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis or the Dracos, not in 1955 or any year before or after. The proof is simple. If Ike had done so, he would have guaranteed himself and his family positions in the ICC. He would have been a member of MJ12. You personally know that Ike didn't do that because no one in your family has held any position in the ICC. As for Ike creating new members of MJ12, you know that is disinformation because MJ12 refused to report to him about anything that they were doing. This is also proof that Ike did not negotiate with the Nazis or the Draco or the Greys. I mean, the Greys and the Draco, So, and the other side, I think, is kind of a repeat because he's getting kind of pissed at me because this is how much I'm trying to be. I'm just not going to go with everything I hear. So I keep asking. I'm like, well, what about this? What about Gerald Light? What about, I'm just asking all that. So this email exchange, he's getting a little bit annoyed. As I already explained to you before, MJ12 had the only legal authority to do that, sign treaties and or agreements with ET alien species, according to the terms of unconditional surrender instrument signed by Truman and all of Congress in 1952, surrendering the U.S. to the Nazis. In other words, Dwight had no such power whatsoever as president when he assumed that position. His powers to negotiate or to sign such treaties or agreements with any ET alien species had already legally been passed on to MJ12 before he assumed office. How many times do I have to say this? Dwight did not sign any treaty or any type of agreement with any ET alien species or with the Nazis. Anyone telling you otherwise is spoon-feeding you ICC Nazi Draco Alliance disinformation, Nazi propaganda, ministry-engineered propaganda, carefully designed to hide the truth of their existence and their powers from the U.S. public. And then I have a video of him saying they spent trillions, millions to try and stop all of this. So the NSA is exempt from all, the live box is covering it up. The NSA is exempt from all laws in the from all laws of the United States, unless the NSA itself is specifically mentioned in any creation of law. It is completely separate, yet our tax dollars are funding it. There was also a great deal of private money used by the NSA to build the alien technology and to keep humanity under control and keep the status quo secure. Even the CIA doesn't know much about the ultra or blue units of the NSA. These are the two highest units the NSA has that deals directly with alien technology and information. So that's Alex Collier. I mean, this kind of stuff I hope doesn't create any censorship. Anyway, because this particular treaty, Greada, in 1954 was agreed upon between the aliens and the ultra units in the NSA, which actually is a government unto itself, they in effect turned away help from outside benevolent races that we could have obtained before. And that's Alex. So fortunately, Balthor actually went rogue and helped, even though it wasn't, it wasn't something that was easily done. So this shows that it wasn't even a president who signed anything, but it was this unit of the NSA, and the rumored treaties were just a scapegoat to disguise the agreements that had already been made. So the fact that it's so out of control and it's so viral, and I'm sure movies are going to be made, saying this, it's like, so I really appreciate you having me on because it sometimes feels like a really lonely battle.
Don't worry about the censorship either. Like I said earlier, Elisa and I have been censored twice in the last couple of weeks on our YouTube channels, but Rumble's absolutely.
Yeah,
We don't
and
care about YouTube. Rumble's the place to be.
Exactly. Yeah. So according to this man who goes by the name Anonymous, I was going to be a part of that interview. Richard Dolan interviewed him on his deathbed. The name was anonymous. Well, obviously it's anonymous. So according to this man who goes by the name Anonymous, at a certain point in the 1950s, then U.S. President Eisenhower had been getting reports about UFOs and ETs and wanted to find out the truth. However, after the Roswell crash of 1947, and with the help of Truman signing new secrecy and security laws, a secret cabal who called themselves MJ-12 took over the UFO and ET issue and took it underground. It went black. Certain military agencies, unknown even to the president and other intelligence heads, kept the whole thing top secret, keeping the technology to themselves and even cutting deals with some of the aliens. Things were out of control, and Eisenhower wanted to find out who these black military groups were and what they were doing. When Eisenhower contacted them, MJ-12 replied that they were outside the jurisdiction of the White House and that their material was classified on a need-to-know basis, which went above the presidency. This apparently infuriated Eisenhower, who sent 2 CIA agents, including Anonymous, to tell the head of MJ-12 to report to him within a week, else he would take the 1st Army from Colorado and invade Area 51 and S4. Eisenhower actually threatened to invade Area 51 if those rogue military operatives would not surrender control of the UFO and ET issue. And that all got shut down. He was not able to go forward with that.
Oh, where's my mouse?
So,
I think 2 there.
Oh, I have 2 slides in one?
I think I skipped 2. Right, hold up. No, it's all right. Yeah.
Okay. So Dan Cooper said this: I know a lot about Commander Val Thor from my sources, White Hats. He did, in fact, advise Ike for years, specifically on how to defeat the ICC Nazi Draco alliance and end their dominion over humanity. And this is why I had to work so closely and why he showed up when I was young, because the Mars recruitment was a huge part of it. Because if I was going to help expose this truth and I'm not here, maybe somebody else would have, but it was a very important, piece to all this. So the Venetians, Commander Val Thor is a Venetian. I'm a Venusian from the planet Venus in our solar system. Themselves are very Christian. They are adamantly opposed to violence. Val Thor and some of his Venusian associates were the ones that told Ike about the Sphere Being Alliance, the Guardians, and they contacted the Guardians and submitted Ike's petition. Val Thor merely advised Ike. His species, the Venusians, however, also signed a non-interference agreement with the Draconian Empire, like so many other planets throughout so many other galaxies. Val Thor is a rebel amongst his kind and is protected directly by the Guardians. He has immunities like me, which have allowed him, like me, to advise without fear of retribution from the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance. Val Thor did not speak to me. He spoke with the Guardians, though. The Guardians speak to me. So Dan communicates with the Guardians. And there's a lot more information about what Val Thor is up to. There's 200 ships that are stationed around the planet, and they're merely observing. But, you can imagine that a Venusian ship is going to hold a lot of high frequency. Anyway, they cloak their ships. One area is Lake Mead. So Val Thor's last meeting with the president did not reap any lasting results. This is from Stranger in the Pentagon. Eisenhower wanted to let the world know of Val's proposed plan, but the Secretary of Defense, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, and the military chiefs of staff were opposed to his suggestion. The president attempted to effect a joint meeting before the General Assembly of the United Nations, but this plan too was rejected. So, so anyway, Eisenhower was not simply a military strategist or political figure. He was a timeline guardian. His documented and still being revealed communications with Val Thor, his refusal to surrender Earth's sovereignty, and the quiet formation of Earth Alliance and White Hat factions within the military were not passive chapters of history. So, and I already mentioned those invasions. So, Ike deserves to be exonerated. And the more we know this, the more we can feel reassured, no matter what kind of disclosure rolls out, that everything is on our side. This ascension window period, what the astrology shows, the planetary configurations, what's emerging through us. I mean, the thing is, it's us. It's us that is collapsing the deep state. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, the people want peace so bad that the governments had better get out of their way and let them have it. And the fact that the Earth Alliance is aligned with this administration is highly positive. So even though we might see things on the world stage that are confusing, look at what we saw on the world stage decades ago with all this going on in the background that we didn't know about. So that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, one of my favourite lines in the Q drops is military civilian alliance. So whatever they're doing from the top down, we've got to come up and meet them. You know, we the power have the people. We the people have the power. Sorry.
Yeah, it's true, and that's why all of us working together and holding the love. I mean, it's everything.
Yeah, and it's true. Like when you think about it, there has to be a lot of crazy things that are going on. You know, it's a war, and people don't understand that. And that's why there's misinformation and disinformation that comes out, or things that seemingly ridiculous, you know, that are said, because it's the art of war, this whole thing.
Oh, definitely. And the smears that I've been noticing have, increased. People putting out videos and saying unbelievable things, about me and other people that we know. And I know, that that's just, they're in their last ditch efforts, and there's really nothing that they can do. So anyway, it's been so fun talking to you both.
No, this was amazing. And, I mean, we'd love to have you on regularly. And I know you had mentioned, if you wanted us to come on your show, I mean, it's just an open door situation, because you're always working on different, I guess, I don't know, these different holes that you go down. By the way, I want you to just tell everyone about your book, right? Which they can get.
Yeah. So a good place to get it is cccpublishing.com. It's called Awakening the Truth Frequency. And that's Brad's website. He was the publisher. And yeah, it just really goes into like all of this, pretty much all of it. So, and it slows down, right? You can take your time with it. The Mars recruitment, things about Eisenhower's administration. And again, it's so important to remember, he was a voice piece for so much that we all carry. And what I love about him is he just, I don't know, somebody brought in a message, and this is what we were talking about in the beginning, that the worst loss in the world is when people don't remember who they are and their mission and their calling. And that it was never about, one president or one leader or a government structure. It's all of us. And that's the most important thing that we remember, is how powerful we are and what a force we are. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it goes into my story. There's a lot of weird personal stories that, and a lot about the planetary grids and ascension and galactic history, galactic things. But I frame it around, our DNA and what's shifting, because the ether energy, the 13th sign, what the ether is doing, it connects with the mitochondrial DNA. The nucleic acids of our DNA are elemental. So what it does is it allows the fences and seals to be dissolved in our DNA to begin to, upgrade. So when you asked, why is this a special time of awakening? The energies that surround us are supporting this process. It's not just an internal awakening. It's really, really supporting it. That's why I said that sometimes people catch up later, with the changes that are going on inside. So, and I really do believe that there's nothing we can't turn around, that there's no bioweapon too powerful to compromise humans indefinitely. The biggest danger, though, is losing your soul and allowing technology to override, or AI or transhumanistic, ideas, because that's what created the Greys,
Yeah, I can understand that.
Not all species of Greys, but
yeah.
But I wish I told the Mars thing a little bit better. But anyway, I would love to come on regularly, and you guys as well, just sing and.
You'd be more than welcome. Where can well, I'll just say this first. Although Elisa and I stream to YouTube, X, and Rumble, our Rumble channels are the ones we've been censored so much. It's still going on. My Rumble channel there, if people could subscribe to that, and Elisa's Rumble channel there, that would be amazing. Get the numbers
sweet.
up. But
and my website's cosmicguide.org, and I think I have my YouTube channel back on the homepage there. But sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, we're all starting to get our YouTube channels back, but we've had 2 warnings already, so we're not bothered about it. We're just going to go as hard as we can and let them do what they want to do. Rumble's absolutely fine. Rumble, Telegram, you know, they're great platforms at the moment. There's so much information we're able to share, which is wonderful. I was going to say as well, the age of disclosure that you've mentioned, I have 2 new films, Elisa, in my watch party folder.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if we do a watch party, we can do that next if you like. That'd be
That's
quite
so
interesting to watch.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Well,
That
it's
would
been
be so
wonderful,
fun.
you guys. What was that, Elisa?
No, I said that would be a lot. That would be a lot of fun. And thank you as always for just your honesty and your everything you've been through and sharing that experience, because it really is so helpful for everybody to understand a lot of these things that you can't Google. I had someone today telling me, I don't know who the heck was looking up, and it was Googled. I was like, is that Google? And he was like annoyed. Yes. Like, yes, it is. And I was like, okay, all right. You know, first I said, is it Wikipedia? And he was like, no. And then it was, but
Yeah.
you know, what I'm saying is we have to, one of the greatest things you guys out there, and thank you so much for following us and supporting us, just keep sharing everything, because when you try to tell, when we personally try to tell people things, they don't take it. But sometimes on a third party basis, or listening to what other people that have, you know, are more in the know or see behind the scenes or have contacts or whatever, it helps to the person to see it in a different way. And if that can happen, sometimes it breaks through some of the resistance, and then they become more curious to do research on their own. So
The more we share content, and the more we spread the word, the quicker this awakening happens.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, Laura, thank you so much. Much love.
You guys, much
That
love
was
to you.
amazing. I'm definitely going to watch this back.
Aw,
I've got a little minute and a half outro video on here. So much love to everyone. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, everyone.
Where we go,
everyone.
go
Thank
all.
you guys for having me. Love you both.
Brilliant. Thanks.
This is the difference between the power of our Creator and anything else, particularly evil. That you can go into a pitch black room full of evil, full of darkness, and light a little candle, and instantly that darkness flees. But you can't do the opposite. You can't go into a well-lit room full of truth and wisdom and righteousness and joy and health and harmony with the universal power. And you can't take any amount of darkness and go into that well-lit room and have any effect whatsoever. That is the metaphor which I frequently think of when I think that I'm not empowered. It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end.